Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got him at
Chris
Already
Dowhouse,
hearing about him are pointless in fantasy in this sense.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Let's get the party started. You're back with Operation Domination live on the Fantasy Football Advice Network channel. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe. We're going to have off-season content throughout the year. There's a 360 show here we got going on for you. And make sure you download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app. It is the injury inquiry episode. It's a little sad today because it is the last injury inquiry episode, at least as a single episode for the rest of the season. We're going to do one more next week, but it's going to be a segment. Brian won't be here for that because he'll be off Tropicaning and all the good stuff over there all the way across the other side of the world. But we'll keep you up to date next week. By the way, and we'll do this off the jump of the show, just so you guys are aware. Operation Domination, we're going to have an episode next Thursday at 9 o'clock at a special time. Obviously, with Christmas being on Wednesday, we're not going to be doing a Christmas Day. Unfortunately, I can't do a Tuesday. So I know. It's going to be a preview show with like 2 games in the books and 1 game going on while we're doing the show, but we'll be able to preview the rest of it. And you can always hit us up on the Fantasy Sports Advice app, and we'll always be there to help you guys out with any lineup questions you have. And if you have them live during the show today, we'll get to them as we go through. But without further ado, we have to introduce our guest for the last time in 2024. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. He's the #1 medical expert in all of fantasy sports. The one, the only, Dr. Brian Scott!
Wow, you're going to have to really step it up to make that better in 2025 , Dan.
Oh man, I gotta exercise these pipes.
Yeah, that's exactly. Starts there.
I hope you recorded one of these because this is the last time for man. So hopefully got one of these on.
Yeah, it's bittersweet, but it's been a pleasure as always.
Better be my ringtone actually when I call you.
There you go.
All right, Bryce. So we got second round of playoffs this week. A laundry list. I mean, you even said it yourself. You're like, holy crap, how did this list get so long? And it's some of it might be good news, but at the end of the day, we had a lot of big names pop up in the most pivotal time. So I've been getting flooded with questions. So I made sure I put the players in that I was getting questions about the most, and of course, the guys that we're most worried about. So let's dive into it. So first up is the guy on our poster for today's show, Patrick Mahomes, ankle injury. First, give me the update on him.
So this is pretty surprising because he apparently, and I'm assuming this is true, he was actually taken off of the injury report today, despite being treated for a high ankle sprain this past weekend, and he's been saying himself he will be playing and starting against the Texans, which is a Saturday game. So it doesn't give him an extra day of rest. But I suspect that if this game ends up being lopsided, which it may not because both of these teams have yet to score over 30 points in a game. I saw a stat today, which is crazy when you look at the records. But he definitely won't be scrambling as much, and he'll definitely be protecting that ankle. So how much time he's out there during the game and how effective he is will remain to be seen, but a very surprising kind of turnaround of events here after seeing what happened to him this past weekend with that ankle.
I mean, he's the bionic man. He's a $6 million man. I don't understand. We've seen Patrick Mahomes come back and play the week after on high ankle sprains before. Like, this isn't something that's happened for the first time. We've seen this in action.
He had like a patella dislocation or something a couple years ago, if you remember that, and came back and played like a week later, which is crazy too. So kudos to him. I mean, for being tough, but at some point in his career, you've got to be very cautious too.
I mean, the benefit is that he's predominantly a pocket passer, so he can kind of get away with it. He doesn't necessarily have to rely on his legs. From an NFL standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint, it's a completely different story. Patrick Mahomes has been a QB2, a mid-level QB2 at that, not necessarily even a high-end one. And one of the things that's even given him somewhat of a floor week to week has been his rushing. He's rushed more this year than he has in any other year in his career. Even though he's out there, I'm not going to expect him to run around a ton with a bad ankle injury this upcoming week. He's had one top 12 finish in the last 5 games. So even if Mahomes was healthy, I don't see why you would start him in your lineups. And I've gotten a ton of questions about Patrick Mahomes. This is why I felt like I needed to address the issue of, should I start Mahomes or this ex-quarterback? I got to tell you, 7 times out of 10, depending on who that ex-quarterback is, it's usually going to be the ex-quarterback I'd rather you take a shot on. One of the big questions I've gotten this week was Michael Penix or Patrick Mahomes. And frankly, I have Michael Penix ranked ahead, even in his first game debut, because he's playing against the Giants and there's more chance for upside. Plain and simple. I know. One last little dig at Brian Giants.
That's okay. That's okay. We're just playing for the draft now, baby. Playing for the draft.
All right. So with that, we go on to our next quarterback, Geno Smith.
Yeah, this is actually very optimistic. He was a full participant in practice today. He was actually feeling so good, even after getting injured last week, that he was trying to talk his way back onto the playing field after he had gone to the locker room with this knee injury. So it sounds like it's not a big deal. He actually got a second day of full practice today, not just one. As a veteran, he's torn his ACL early in his career. He knows what he's doing. He's not going to risk it at this point in his career. He wants to be out there to help the team. He's only got a limited time left in this league if you look at the numbers. So it sounds good. It sounds like it was minor. We should see him back.
Well, that's good news for the pass catchers. Now, for Geno Smith, again, it's almost similar to Patrick Mahomes. If you're thinking about Geno Smith from a fantasy standpoint, don't. He hasn't finished better than QB 19 in the past 5 games. It's not a fantasy asset we're talking about. But if Sam Howell would have started, first of all, he's terrible. Second of all, it gives you no upside for these pass catchers. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's a career 5.49 air yards per attempt. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. You're not getting anything down the field. So with Geno, at least it does boost the ceiling of a JSN. It does boost the floor of a DK Metcalf if he's able to go. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But at least from that standpoint, it is an upgrade for the pass catchers. What do we got on Aiden O'Connell?
Yeah, he got 2 full practice sessions in yesterday and today, and it sounds like he is on track to suit up again this weekend. First game back in a couple games, according to Antonio Pierce, their head coach as well. So it sounds like he's getting over this injury and should be ready to go.
Yeah, that's great news, because this is another situation where we need a quarterback that we trust to get the ball to his primary targets that we lean on for fantasy football purposes. For the Raiders, I'm talking about Brock Bowers, and I'm talking about Jacoby Myers. When O'Connell has played this season, started and finished his games, Myers has averaged a 29% target share, while Bowers has averaged a 28% target share. So both of these are high-quality volume fantasy assets that you can turn to as long as O'Connell, not Desmond Ridder, is in the lineup. So I feel confident about Bowers. I'm feeling confident about Jacoby Myers being a high-end wide receiver 3 this week because of that too. Oh, the Giants. So
my boy Tommy Cutlets. He got a concussion, but I don't know if it matters. I mean, Drew Lock's going to play. They've already pretty much made that clear. Tommy D might not even be out of concussion protocol. He's been limited the last 2 days. So he's going to, have to do a few more things before he'll get cleared. But it sounds like even if he does, he's going to be backing up Drew Lock this weekend.
Malik Neighbors has performed well with every quarterback on the Giants except for Tommy Chicklets. He's the only one he can't do anything.
That's Cutlets, Dan. Cutlets.
No Chicklets. That was on purpose. Don't worry. He's the only one. So as long as it's Drew Lock, Tim Boyle, Daniel Jones, who's gone, Malik Neighbors has the highest target share of all the NFL wide receivers. All of them. So they'll get him the ball. May not be downfield, but at least he has the volume. They'll give him a wide receiver 2 status regardless of the quarterback. I did have a question coming in here from Ray. He wants to start 2 in standard scoring. Cooper Kupp versus the Jets, Garrett Wilson versus the Rams, McConkey versus the Broncos, or Jacoby Myers versus the Jaguars. I talked about this in yesterday's show, actually. I know Cooper Kupp had the worst possible outcome you could possibly get, which was 0 points in that game last week. However, if you somehow manage to make it this far, and apparently Ray did, with Cooper Kupp still in the lineup, I would play him again this week against Isaiah Oliver. That's the matchup he's going to get against the Jets. That's a winnable matchup for him consistently. The weather's going to be cold in New York on Sunday, but it's not going to be bad weather. It's going to be clear skies and not a lot of wind. So I do like Cooper Kupp there. And then for the next one, hopefully you already put him in your lineup at this point because we're talking on a Thursday night, but it would be Ladd McConkey. I'll answer this as a question as if you didn't put him in, or if you're somebody out there with something a similar situation, you're looking for Saturday or Sunday here, it would be Garrett Wilson for me. Now, Jacoby Myers, I have him ranked just 3 spots, so it's close between Garrett Wilson and Jacoby Myers in this game coming up. But Aaron Rodgers been playing a little bit better as of late. I do think the Rams are going to put up points here in a Jets defense that hasn't been quite as good lately. So I do think Garrett Wilson will be able to get his this week too as a low-end wide receiver too. All right, so now we turn to the running backs. Alvin Kamara dealing with a groin issue. What do we got there?
Not good news for Kamara fans and fantasy football owners of Kamara because multiple reports are suggesting that Kamara's groin injury is actually a lot more serious than initially was anticipated, could potentially sideline him for the rest of the season. Kendre Miller might be getting the call again here. He's got a Monday night football game. It sounds like he's at least going to miss that. We're talking about Kamara now. But it multiple reports have said that this could be a several week absence.
Yeah, so not great timing if you've been having Alvin Kamara. Not that he's been lighting it up as of late anyway, but I talked about this yesterday too, actually. Go back and check out the show when we did the Week 16 preview. Kendre Miller's a fine option. He was getting double-digit touches the last 2 weeks. He has looked productive in those last 2 weeks. The Saints don't have many places to turn to, and we may be looking at snow in Green Bay for this game coming up this week. So I'm all in on the Kendre Miller train being a good pivot option. I would take him over, let's say, a Jerome Ford, who a lot of people have talked about picking up this week as well. So I would go Kendre Miller there over Jerome Ford, a much more efficient runner on the ground. And the Saints just don't have many options to be able to turn to. So I suspect even if it's a negative game script, that his volume will be okay ultimately. Joe Mixon, what do you got on his ankle?
So he was limited in practice Tuesday and Wednesday, but this is a veteran. He's dealt with a lot of ankle issues over the years. It sounds like they're just being cautious here. He has told reporters and has said confidently that he is on track and he will be playing against the Chiefs on Saturday.
And look, I know 2 of the last 3 games, Mixon's been a disappointment. But if you have Joe Mixon, if you've gotten this far with Joe Mixon, you are not benching Joe Mixon right now. This is still an RB1 that needs to be in your lineup. I don't care if it's against the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't care if he's a little bit banged up. I've been shocked how many questions I've been getting about whether or not I should bench Joe Mixon. No, don't do it. Don't get cute. Don't get cute in the fantasy playoffs, please, for the love of God. All right, so let's talk about Tony Pollard on the Titans dealing with that ankle issue.
Yeah, so he hasn't practiced this week yet. That's at least 2 days of practice, one maybe a walkthrough. But given that he has a history of ankle injuries, had ankle surgery for a fractured fibula a couple of years ago, this could be a week-to-week thing. This could be a day-to-day thing until we see him on the practice field, before this weekend's matchup. I'm saying it's highly doubtful.
Yeah, that's a shame too, because Pollard deserves a lot of credit. I don't think he got enough credit this year from fantasy owners, from media in general. The toilet bowl that has been the Titans quarterback situation in their offense. And yet Tony Pollard's been one of the most consistent RB2s you could possibly have had all season long and turning in some RB1 performances throughout the year as well. Now, if he can't go, or even if he's not 100%, we know what Tajay Spears could be. He showed it last week, and he had a 27-point performance. He actually finishes a top 12 running back himself and outsnapped Tony Pollard 39-31 in that game. We know he's explosive. He can make that big play happen if he gets the opportunities on top of it with a Mason Rudolph who likes to check the ball down quite a bit to his running backs in the passing game. Fire up Tajay Spears. He could be a top 24 play if Tony Pollard's not able to go this week, and we should find that out sooner rather than later. So that could be a great option. Oh, the 49ers and their running backs. Oh, good God. Isaac Guerendo, go.
Well, let me preface this, Dan, with every year I do a pre-draft injury special. And I feature these guys coming into the NFL draft out of college who have dealt with injuries throughout their career, as they head into the NFL and why they fall with their draft stock. Now, Guerendo didn't make this year's list for me, or the years that he came out, but Kendre Miller did. And if you look at Kendre Miller, he's done great. He's had a great career so far this year, especially coming off a major knee injury when he was in college. Now, Guerendo missed a lot of time in college. Over the course of like 8 seasons, I think he only played in 5 years. I think he only played in like 40 games. So he missed some time because of injury, and now this is the second week that he's gotten the call to handle the backfield, and he's already dealing with a second injury. Now this is a hamstring issue that they're saying is likely going to keep him out this weekend at the very least. He's yet to step back on the practice field since the injury, and as you know, like I say, with hamstring injuries, you've got to be able to show that you can go all out, full speed sprint in a practice session at the very least before most guys are confident enough, most medical staff is confident enough to let these guys suit up. So I don't see him returning this weekend. Next up, I believe, is Patrick Taylor.
Yeah, he is. He's going to be the next guy out. Guerendo, his Achilles heel, no pun intended, was hamstring injuries in college, so it's not necessarily surprising.
And he did deal with this in training camp this year, too, apparently. He had a hamstring issue.
He did. And this is a guy who's relying on his speed. So if he doesn't have his speed, he's not as effective as a running back. So it should be Patrick Taylor as the next man up. It was funny. Guerendo got hurt late in that Thursday night game because we only got to see 3 snaps out of Patrick Taylor, but it was the only other running back to get snaps. Kyle Juszczyk does his own role. So when you look at the backfield snaps, there's a Kyle Juszczyk on there. But Keyshawn Vaughn is a journeyman. Israel Bonaconda, who they took off of waivers a few weeks ago, is brand new to the team. I don't see this being a situation where those guys get mixed in. This is not going to be a rotation. I think they trust Patrick Taylor. He knows the offense. He's been around Green Bay and San Francisco for a long time, so he knows the style of offense quite well. He's a decent pass protector. I think we will see him be a bell cow. Now, is he explosive like Guerendo? No. The big play is not going to be there, but he's in a run-oriented offense, and he's going to get a heavy volume workload. He's going to be a low-end RB2, with Guerendo likely out this week. So if he's available late still, I don't know why he would be. If he's available late still, go ahead and pick him up if you're looking for a spot start this week. All right, so what do you got on David Montgomery?
So this is interesting, okay? So, initially reports were that he had a serious MCL sprain that is going to require season-ending surgery. Now, apparently, he had a third medical opinion. Yes, a third medical opinion. And now they're optimistic that he can rehab, avoid surgery, and make it back potentially in time for the playoffs. I don't know what to make of that, Dan, because if you see enough surgeons, eventually one of them will say what you want them to say. and it might actually be don't do surgery. And it sounds like Montgomery heard what he wanted to hear from this third opinion. And it's not surgery. So I don't know, man. I mean, good luck. When 2 out of the 3 guys are saying it's a surgical case, it's a significant MCL sprain that they're recommending. I mean, I've got to go with the 2 guys that are saying do it. But also on the flip side of that coin, surgeons want to operate. That's what they do. That's what they're trained to do. That's what they like to do. So it's not surprising that 2 of the 3 would say yes. But, again, if you're looking for one of them to say non-surgical rehab, you can come back. You can find that guy if you go to the right source. So it's kind of one of those things in the medical profession where, if you are looking for a particular answer to solve your problem, you will find it from someone if you seek out enough providers. And in his case, 3. I'm not so sure I'd recommend that for most guys at his level, but that's what happened, and that's the story. So interesting to see. We'll have to see if it actually plays out in his favor and he's able to get back.
Yeah, I mean, for the fantasy playoffs, he's done. But, I mean, if you're a Detroit fan, maybe that offers some hope that maybe you get David Montgomery back. I mean, he did play the rest of that game. He wasn't nearly as effective as David Montgomery usually is. With this, we know Jahmyr Gibbs to the moon. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs could be the number 1 running back for the last 2 weeks here at the fantasy playoffs. I got him ranked at number 2 heading into this week. So I've already talked about Gibbs in yesterday's show. Go back, listen to it on Operation Domination, your favorite podcast app, or go back and watch it on the Fantasy Football Advice Network here. But we went into great detail about Jahmyr Gibbs and how he might just go off for you for the championships now. All right, so Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, the Seattle backfield. What's our updates there?
Yeah, well, Walker returned for a full practice session today after missing the last 2 weeks with his calf injury, so it sounds optimistic that he should be ready to go, given the rest he's had and ample time to recover. Zach Charbonnet was limited in practice today with an oblique injury. Those can be tough to treat. It's really just a matter of symptomatic treatment. It's an oblique, so it's tough to do a lot of stuff with that because it's your core. It's involved in almost everything we do. But no reason to think he can't be ready for this weekend. We'll have to see if he's able to ramp it up tomorrow.
Yeah, so it sounded like Kenneth Walker's going to be good to go. So that's the good news there. So you get him back at least, even if Charbonnet can't go. You're only playing Charbonnet if Walker was going to be out anyway. So luckily, we don't have to worry about Kenny McIntosh being the guy that we had to talk about. Sincere McCormick, he went on IR.
Yeah, well, he was telling everyone on Instagram before the Raiders even came out and said anything that he'll see you next season. So I think the writing was on the wall there, and I'll take him in for his word for it before I listen to the team. So it sounds like that was inevitable. But yeah, some kind of ankle injury that's going to at least sideline him for the rest of the regular season, and the Raiders aren't doing anything after that anyway. So
yeah, and look, I know it's been annoying. Like you're looking. People are looking for spot starts for running backs this week with so many injuries and depending upon what situation you're in. So, look, I don't want to have to pick a Raiders running back. If I can avoid Alexander Mattison and Amir Abdullah altogether, that would be my preference. If you have to pick one, it would be Abdullah because of what he gives them in the receiving game. And the Raiders are in a situation where I'm just going to count them as being in a negative game script every single week, which should favor Amir Abdullah. So if you have to pick one, it would be Abdullah, but I don't want to if I can avoid it at any other costs. Just skip over to the wide receivers here. Let's talk a little Jalen Waddle knee injury this week.
Oh, you threw me for a loop there, Dan. Nick Chubb. How we not talk about Nick Chubb?
Oh, because we already know about Jerome Ford and what he does, and he's kind of a ho-hum volume, high-end RB3, and we know Chubb's out for the rest of the year. We'll see him next season. I mean, it's the same song. It has
an injury again. It's an injury for Chubb. That's the third time he's gone on season-ending injury IR with a surgery's not expected, which is good. But since 2020, 3 years now that he's breaking down, man. I hate to say it, but Rashawn Johnson's coming back from his concussion. He should clear. Trey Benson ankle hasn't practiced yet. Jalen Waddle. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you for a loop there. No, so he's considered day to day with some type of knee injury. Not exactly sure what it is. I think he played through it during the last game, if I'm not mistaken. So it doesn't sound like it's too serious.
He got knocked out in that last game.
Oh, he did? Okay, sorry. But it doesn't sound like it's too serious. It sounds like he avoided a major injury, the team was saying. And he's considered day-to-day. I think he might have got a limited session in today. I'm not sure. No?
No.
Yeah, I couldn't find much on him. But regardless, that could just be more of a precautionary measure. But given the Dolphins are really struggling here, we might not see him till maybe next week, if at all, depending on the severity here. But they're saying he's day to day.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's just this week, ultimately. So maybe you got him back for week 17, although I don't know how much you're really trusting the Dolphins offense necessarily, who not named Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane, because that's where the volumes, Janu Smith too, for that matter, because that's where the volume consistently goes. It hasn't consistently been going to Jalen Waddle, although he's been better as of late. What did happen, though, when Waddle got knocked out in that game is Malik Washington stepped in and he took over that wide receiver 2 role right off the rip. I mean, he was second in snaps, second in routes run. And Malik Washington is somebody I liked quite a bit coming out of college. He was highly productive coming out of college. He's a little bit on the small side, but his quick twitch, his speed, it fits what the Dolphins want to do. So I'm not trusting Malik Washington necessarily in my fantasy playoffs. I maybe pick him up if I think I got a decent shot to go to the championship next week, and maybe I want another option in case Waddle can't go again next week. But for DFS, he's $3,700 on Sleeper. That's a nice little contrarian play that you can go in that direction. He's got a tough matchup against San Francisco. Not a lot of people know about him. So DFS is somewhere where I do have some interest in Malik Washington this week with the role that he stepped into. All right, so DK Metcalf, what's going on with him?
I'm not too concerned about it. This dude's a stud. He actually practiced in full today, so I don't think this is going to set him back at all. We should see him full go this weekend.
I mean, that part's good news for the health side. But DK Metcalf has been, well, frankly, anything but a stud for fantasy as of late. I mean, he's only finished once in the top 36 since week 11. That's it. And he finished 32nd that game against the San Francisco 49ers. Since the bye week, which was week 10 for them, he's at a 22% target share. JSN in that same time has had a 27% target share. This is gone. JSN is the now number one wide receiver. Metcalf is not catching his bombs. He hasn't gone over 100 yards since week 4. He hasn't caught a touchdown since week 7. I have DK Metcalf as a wide receiver 36. I don't think he's a must play. And depending upon what your options are heading into this Sunday, which is crazy to say, but that's just what it's been. And if you're in the fantasy playoffs, so I want to keep playing a guy who just consistently hasn't performed for entire second half of the season. I don't know. Again, depends on what your options are, but he is benchable if you have another option. All right, so there's something interesting. Hollywood Brown looks like he might be making an appearance.
Yeah, he's expected back. His first game back since having to undergo surgery for that dislocated sternoclavicular joint earlier in the season, which placed him on IR. I mean, he's had ample time to recover from that. It's a pretty rare injury to get normally in football, so the chance of re-injury is pretty low. I think it's going to take a little bit for him to kind of shake off some rust and get used to being hit again, which is something you really can't replicate in practice with that. So that's really going to be the only downside here. But as far as his ability to stay in shape, cardiovascular-wise, he shouldn't have had any setback in that as long as he was doing what he needed to do off the field to remain in football shape. It's just going to be a matter of kind of shaking off some rust.
Yeah, shaking off some rust, and then there's in shape, and then there's football shape, and sometimes it might take a few weeks for that. So, look, a lot of people race to the waiver wire to pick up Hollywood Brown. If you're a redraft league, maybe it's a speculative ad depending upon what he does this week, that maybe you want to play him on Christmas Day on Netflix, on Wednesday in your championship weeks if he actually takes over Xavier Worthy's role. But that would be surprising to me. It's his first game, not just this season, but his first game with the Chiefs. I mean, this is a guy, this is his first year coming over. Like, we haven't had any time to get him chemistry wise really involved into the playbook. I'm sure he's been studying it, but it's different when you're actually out there and running it. So I expect really just a part-time role for Hollywood Brown, not somebody I'm necessarily racing out to go get. Shouldn't be somebody that you actually think about playing in your lineups. All right, so we got Cedric Tillman. We got any developments on him? He's been out a long time with his concussion.
He didn't practice yesterday. He was seen today during the media portion of practice working out on the side, so that is a good sign. It's one step in the right direction, but he's going to need to do a lot more to get off the concussion protocol. So we'll have to see.
Well, here's the slight good news in a way. DTR is playing, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and if he's playing, I don't want to play a Browns receiver, period. So even if Cedric Tillman was active, I still wouldn't have him in my lineup. Probably wouldn't even have him rostered. There's an outside chance, I think, that Jameis Winston could be right back to starting next week, because we've seen time and time again where Robinson comes in and doesn't make it till halftime because he's just that bad. Again, another player I did a deep dive in on yesterday's show. Go back and listen to it, but I'll lay out the highlight here for you. His career air yards per attempt, 1.68, not even 2 air yards per attempt in his career. It's hard to be that bad. Seriously, it's hard to be that bad. So I don't want to touch any of the wide receivers. If David Njoku, who we'll talk about a little bit, if he's able to go, he gets heavily targeted. Jerome Ford might get some targets out of the backfield, but the wide receivers are screwed. Jerry Jeudy, bust of the week for me. All right, so George Pickens, is he going to come back from this hamstring or no?
No, he's already been ruled out for this weekend. And I mean, I think we were saying last week, this is probably going to be a several week thing here. As far as I know, he hasn't even stepped on the practice field again since he went down with this. So who knows? We'll have to see.
Yeah, it was another guy I was getting a lot of questions about. I kept telling people, look, I don't think he's going to go. But while Pickens misses time, while it's a downgrade for the Steelers offense as a whole, especially for Russell Wilson, it hasn't been a downgrade for Pat Freiermuth. Now, he hasn't necessarily been a huge target monster, but he has led the team in end zone targets since George Pickens has been missing, and he scored a touchdown in each of the last 3 weeks. If anybody on the Steelers is going to score against the Ravens, my money is on Pat Freiermuth, and therefore he's a low-end tight end 1 heading into this week as a result. All right, so Xavier Legette, Alec Pierce, anything on those two?
So Legette, the news coming out of Carolina about Legette's not good. They're saying that, well, first of all, they're not saying it's a groin. Now they're saying it's a hip issue, that he's going to be week to week. He didn't practice yesterday. It sounds like he's not going to be playing at least this weekend. What he does next week will have to kind of be determined based on what he's able to do at practice next week. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Alec Pierce, concussion, didn't practice Wednesday, was seen on the field doing some limited stuff today. But again, just like Tillman, you're going to need to do a lot more than just that to get cleared in time for a weekend game. So it sounds like he's going to be out as well, at least this weekend.
Yeah, so with Leggett out and David Moore's actually a little bit banged up himself for Carolina. DFS-wise, I already talked about Jalen Coker as somebody who I like a lot DFS-wise, $4,200 on DraftKings this week. Came right in, took over the David Moore role in line, with Adam Thielen. Bryce Young had one of his, old crappy Bryce Young days, and yet they were still both able to get a healthy amount of targets. They have a decent match against Arizona this week. So Jalen Coker, Adam Thielen, two guys I think are wide receiver threes and playable, even in a fantasy playoff matchup. Alec Pierce is out. That means that Donnie Mitchell gets to take his role, but they're playing against the Tennessee Titans, and I don't trust Anthony Richardson throwing the ball to anybody not named Michael Pittman or Josh Downs. So we're going to ride it off on that one. Let's get to the tight ends. We got David Njoku dealing with this hamstring issue. What do you got?
As far as I know, he hasn't yet practiced. However, apparently he was trying to convince coaches last week that he was ready to go, which is kind of surprising. I think they thought better of it and probably know better than to throw him out there with a hamstring issue without having been able to practice. So, again, like we talked about earlier, if you can't get on there and get through a full session and at least show that you can sprint and do what you need to do at the tight end position with the hamstring injury, I don't foresee him being ready this weekend either. And again, he still hasn't practiced so far as I know. He's going to need to get at least a full session in before he's ready to go.
He's a tough dude. Remember, this is the guy who was in the middle of a house fire, had burns, and still played that same week. Like, this is a tough dude.
Understood. But then, he did miss time with that ankle injury from the horse collar tackle earlier this year too. And there was thought that he was going to come back. So maybe they're just, pulling the reins back on him a little bit to protect him from himself. I mean, that's a real possibility. Some of these guys don't know better, and you kind of have to, sit them down a little bit and be like, you need to wait. We'll kind of help you make that decision because you're not looking out for your best interest here. So maybe that's what's going on. I don't know, but I'd be shocked if he all of a sudden had no practice this week and then jumped back on the field with coming off a hamstring. It'd be pretty shocking.
Well, look, from an NFL standpoint, from his long-term career view standpoint, there's no reason David Njoku should be taking the field, period, for the rest of the season. It's over for the Browns. And he's a crucial player to them moving forward into the future. I did make a note, if he somehow does go out there, again, he's the only pass catcher who I can trust with DTR to at least get the football. In starts that DTR's had, Njoku's averaged 11 targets per game when DTR play. Like, he's the only one he's got eyes for. He's the only one he can get the football to. So if he does play, I probably would still start David Njoku as a top 10 tight end, even if he's out there on one leg, because of how much he's probably going to get thrown the football to him. Speaking of other tight ends, Zach Ertz dealing with that concussion issue. What we got here?
Did not practice yesterday. Not sure if he was able to get out there today at all. But again, as you head later into the week here with concussions, the less you do, the less likely you are to get cleared. So,
yeah, in his absence, Ben Sonnett did split snaps down the middle with John Bates. They both had 42 each. Sonnett, though, he ran more routes. He had 25 routes run compared to 10 to John Bates. So he is more of the pass catcher. Regardless, if you're in redraft, I don't see why we'd be taking a shot on a rookie who's just made his debut and only had one target during that stretch when Zach Ertz was out anyway. So probably not looking at the Ben Sonnett option. Maybe if you're in Dynasty and you have no better option, at least he's going to be a starter and get some playing time that way. But otherwise, I'm not too excited about his prospects. Brenton Strange, who's been a hot player topic so far this week for guys looking for streamers. What do you got on his shoulder?
Well, he was limited both days this week thus far, but it sounds like it's nothing serious, and they are expecting him to play. So we should see him suit up this weekend despite the shoulder injury.
Yeah, I kind of made my feelings known yesterday about Brenton Strange. I think the guy's just a dude. And I think people in fantasy are overreactionary to the previous week. He had 12 targets last week. So everybody's losing their mind like, oh, the tight end who gets volume, we got to go get him. Look, 12 targets by far the most he's ever had. Week 2, when he had to start for Evan Ingram, he had 6, which is fine. But then went 5, 4, 3. It continuously went down after that. This is a guy who's just like every other tight end that you're hoping finishes inside the top 12, is touchdown dependent. And I don't trust, even against the Raiders, I don't necessarily trust the Jaguars outside of Brian Thomas and the running backs, depending upon game script, to actually get the ball consistently and be in positions to score. And in this game against the Raiders, I think it's going to be Tank Bigsby, because it's one of the few times I think the Jacksonville Jaguars might actually have a positive game script. And we know Brian Thomas will get his. Brenton Strange is somebody I have outside of my top 12. I think you have other options you can go to this particular week. With that, Brian, that's it for you and for me for 2024. It was a wonderful season. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show every single week and giving us your great insights, man. Of course, this is not the end of our working relationship. We're gonna definitely be talking, and you're gonna see us together more often next season. But what do you have coming up? What's your off-season plans, and where can we check you out at?
Well, got some episodes coming out in the new year, working on getting those edited and published. So look for one coming out the first week of January. I just dropped, well, I didn't drop it, but Green Gridiron, the custom helmet builders out of Greenville, South Carolina, just released the video I did with them where I went to their headquarters, toured their shop, built a custom helmet for the Injured List podcast. And so that video is now up on YouTube. I've shared some clips of that on my social media pages, so check that out. Cool episode, a lot of fun to do with them. We talked about some helmet tech, history of helmets, some other stuff along the way. And yeah, you know, I'll be kind of doing my episodes. I'm looking to try and get to the Super Bowl this year. We're trying to get to Radio Row, maybe do some live feeds. We're waiting on some stuff with that. Hopefully that'll pull through for us. If not, no big deal. We'll just re-gear for next year maybe. But I got some episodes coming out, you know, with the podcast and everything. So follow me on social media, X at Injured List Pod, Instagram and Facebook, The Injured List Podcast. Of course, the website, theinjuredlist.com.
He's one of the best, folks. Make sure you check it out. Again, the Injured List Podcast. Go find it. Go listen to it. Again, we'll be back next week, Operation Domination at 9 p.m. at a special time on a special week for the holiday week. And we'll get you previewed for the rest of week 17 for your championship weeks. Of course, don't forget, there's 2 games on Christmas Day, which is Wednesday on Netflix. So make sure Tuesday you're setting your lineups. Make sure you hit us up on the Fantasy Sports Advice app. That way we'll be able to help you out there. Download Operation Domination, your favorite podcast app, and hit subscribe on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel. Guys, good luck this weekend. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. Hey there, I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you.